If it's happening in professional wrestling, we're breaking it down. The matches, the moments, the rumors, and yes, even the hot takes. This is Pro Wrestling Focus. No nonsense, no wasted motion, just pure wrestling talk. Now, here's your host, Cody Springer.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Pro Wrestling Focus. And on today's show, I'm going to be talking about Saturday night's main event, the return of the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. I'm also going to be discussing the return of the Wyatt Sicks. The Wyatt Sicks made their return on SmackDown this past Friday. Going to be talking about that special moment. And then I'm going to get into what happened on Raw last night with the Money in the Bank qualifying matches and the descent within the Judgment Day. And then I'm also going to be discussing some of your latest news and rumors. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I want to kick off the show talking about the Wyatt Sicks' return to SmackDown. Yeah, we've been waiting several months for this. The Wyatt Sicks, they were pulled from TV when Bo Dallas, Uncle Howdy, whatever you want to call him, was injured. And we didn't know when exactly the group would return to WWE programming. The last we seen them, they were in a feud with the Final Testament. That was Karrion Kross's faction, which is no longer a thing because, AOP and Paul Ellerling got fired once again from the company. They were released months ago. So, yeah, and then the Wyatt Sicks, they were supposed to be in a feud with the Judgment Day from what we were hearing. But, they've got moved to SmackDown. Bo Dallas was hurt. So the group's been off TV ever since. And a lot of people are getting concerned about the group's future within the WWE. Are they going to stick around? Are they going to get released? But they made their return this past Friday night on SmackDown. The Street Profits were defending their WWE Tag Team titles against Fraxium, and DIY got involved as well, along with the Motor City Machine Guns. And then the lights went dark. Montez Ford was on the top rope. And then the lights came back on. The Wyatt Sicks is what Montez Ford seen. And his reaction was priceless. He just had that look like, oh shit, Lord help me, because he started, doing the prayer. He was saying a prayer and everything, and those guys started wrecking shop. Dexter Loomis, Joe Gacy, Eric Rowan, Nikki Cross, and Bo Dallas, Uncle Howdy, they were all, wrecking shop, taking everybody out. And then Uncle Howdy delivered the final coup de grace, hitting the Sister Abigail on Johnny Gargano. And then they had a birthday cake, which they slid into the ring. And then Uncle Howdy, said, I think he said, I live my life for you, or my life for you. Talking about his brother, the late great Bray Wyatt. So, yeah, it was fitting for them to return on Bray Wyatt's birthday. He would have been 38 years old, if he was still with us today. And man, I'm telling you, man, I miss Bray Wyatt. I really do. And I feel like it was just a shame how things ended, because Bray had a lot to give still to the wrestling business and just to the world in general. And his impact on the wrestling business is still lasting, right now. It is. Even though he's been gone for 2 years, his impact on the wrestling business, is still there. It's still present. It's still in the moment. And now you have his brother, Bo, continuing the character of Uncle Howdy, and then, having Eric Rowan, who was a part of the original Wyatt family. And then you have Dexter, Joe Gacy, and Nikki Cross, part of the group. They're help continuing that legacy that Bray Wyatt had built. And, I think it's still a great thing to see. But now the question remains, will Alexa Bliss be joining up with the Wyatt Sicks? Because, a lot of people, there's a lot of speculation, between dirt sheets and fans that she is going to be joining the group, or she's been the secret leader of the Wyatt Six this whole time. So now they're both back. They're both on television. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all coincides. If Alexa is going to be a part of them, which, to be honest, it'd be a very simple thing to do, because Alexa's still kind of like, her character right now is like a mix of who she used to be when she was the goddess and, the Alexa that was with the Fiend, where she has the Lily doll and all that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they tie the group and Alexa together. And, because it kind of seems like the Wyatt Six are still acting on their own accord, so to speak. Because, they just, they decided to make their presence known during the WWE Tag Team Championship match. So are they going to gun for the titles? Are they going to, or were they just making a statement, at the expense of the champions and Fraxium and the other guys that got involved? Or are they, gunning for the gold? I don't know. But I do think there's going to be something, coming in the future between the Wyatt Six and Alexa Bliss. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they tie the two together. But I am glad to see them back. And I think it's, I think it's a cool thing for sure that they're going to continue on with the group and continuing to honor the legacy of Bray Wyatt. All right, let's talk about Saturday night's main event that was on NBC and Peacock this past Saturday. Now, I didn't do a prediction show or review for Saturday night's main event because I don't really consider Saturday night's meant to be a actual PLE. I don't consider Saturday night's main event to be a premium live event. I consider Saturday night's main event to be more of a special than a PLE. So that's why I didn't do a review or prediction show. So if you were expecting me to do that, I apologize, but that's just how I view it. But I will be doing a predictions and review show for Money in the Bank coming up here next week. So I will be doing a preview and review show for Money in the Bank. But let's talk about Saturday night's main event because we had some noteworthy things that happened on this show. We had Bronson Reed return from injury, and he made his presence known during the CM Punk and Sami Zayn versus Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker tag match, where he bulldozed CM Punk into the barricade, and Bronson Reed has joined Seth Rollins' group. So now it is Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker, Paul Heyman, and now Bronson Reed. So yeah, I mean, this was an interesting development because, Bronson Reed and Seth Rollins, they have some history. Bronson Reed, just last year, tsunami'd Seth Rollins like 1,000 times, and it put Seth out of action for a little bit. And then Seth came back and had a few matches with Bronson Reed. and now they're buddies. Now they're part of the same team, same group, and I don't know why this group still does not have a name. You know what I mean? Like you got three people, three wrestlers a part of this group. You have Rollins, Breaker, and Reed with Paul Heyman as their support, but you have no name. Like, come on, dude. Like, I don't know why this group still does not have a name. I mean, you could argue, do they even need a name? But every faction in wrestling has a name. A name that they refer to themselves as. You have the Judgment Day. You have the Wyatt Six. You have, you know, the point is, like, all factions in wrestling have a name. They have a name attached to their group. That's who they identify with them as. Like, oh yeah, these guys, yeah, they're a part of this group. Like, oh yeah, these three right here, yeah, they're known as this. So the fact that they don't have a name yet for their faction is a little weird. But hopefully soon they'll come up with a name to call themselves. But yeah, so Bronson Reed came back. He helped Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker get the win over CM Punk and Sami Zayn. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what these three can do together. And then we had Zelina Vega successfully defend the United States Championship against Chelsea Green. I kind of felt the in-ring work was a little sloppy in this match. I just don't know if it was just miscommunication, or maybe timing was a little bit off and it caused some sloppiness in the ring. But I'm glad that Selena retained her title. Chelsea Green suffered a broken nose during this match. Zelina, she hit the 619 on Chelsea at one point during the match, and when Zelina didn't necessarily connect on the 619 like she normally does, so she kind of just like kicked Chelsea in the face, and then this is what caused Chelsea to have her broken nose. But it appears that Chelsea's going to be fine, and she'll be working through the broken nose. But it busted her open, and yeah, it was kind of a pretty gnarly image, to see, Chelsea Green with, having the blood, you know, gushing out of her nose and everything like that. It made for, a great visual, I thought. And then there was John Cena and R-Truth, and oh my God. Yeah, this was fucking hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Because, Cena came out, and then R-Truth came out, dressed how John Cena used to dress, with a red and blue garb. And his t-shirt replaced Cena with an image of himself, and then he referred to himself as Ron Cena. Ron Cena. Oh God, this shit was fucking funny. I got a kick out of it. And yeah, so yeah, it was just more about, creating a comedic moment. They've been telling the story with R-Truth and John Cena, how Truth, he looks at Cena as his childhood hero, even though he's older than John, and it's just very absurd. It's so absurd, and they've been doing this for years now. And Truth has been trying to get John to see the light, the error of his ways, because Cena's on the quest to ruin wrestling and walk out in December as the WWE champion, because he feels like that's going to freeze the pro wrestling timeline as we know it, and all this nonsense. But yeah, it was funny. And Cena, he resorted to dirty tactics to get the win over R-Truth. He acted like he was going to hit Truth with the championship, and get disqualified. just acting like he doesn't care about getting DQ'd. And then Cena acted like he had a change of heart there for a moment, and then he handed the referee the championship. And when the referee had his back turned, he kicked Truth in the nuts and hit him with an AA and retained the WWE Championship. And then still clocked him in the head with the damn title anyways. So, but yeah, so that will conclude that little storyline, hopefully. And then we had Damian Priest versus Drew McIntyre in the steel cage match. And I felt this was a decent TV cage match. It wasn't anything like spectacular, but it was decent. And then, they had Jesse, the Body Ventura, on commentary. And I'm just going to say this. I love Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura tells it like it is. I have much respect for the former governor of Minnesota. And, he, was going on this tirade about, he felt like it was weak of Damian to escape the cage after he just hit the concerto on McIntyre. He was just going off, because if you know about Jesse Ventura, the man's gonna speak his mind. He ain't gonna sugarcoat anything. But I felt like it was a decent match, and then like I said, Damian hit the concerto on Drew and escaped the cage, and this was done so that way they could write Drew off of TV, because Drew has been pretty badly banged up ever since Backlash. Where he took that South of Heaven onto those tables in the crowd. It was a spot that banged up both Drew and Damian. But it looks like Drew is dealing with some neck issues right at the moment, so he's going to be taking time off of TV to deal with that. And yeah, so Drew McIntyre might be gone for a while. So we may not be seeing him on SmackDown for months, it looks like. So, but like we've said before on the podcast, the wrestler's health is first and foremost before anything else. So, I'd rather Drew go out there or take some time off and get healthy before coming back stronger than ever, and heal whatever it is that needs healing. And then that will bring us to the main event. But before we get into the main event, John Cena approached Jey Uso in the back, and Cena brought up his quest to ruin wrestling, and he said how fitting it would be, if I walked out with the WWE Championship in December, and Jey Uso loses the World Heavyweight Championship to a YouTuber. He said I think that would definitely ruin wrestling. So John Cena has turned his attention to Jey Uso, and Cena might be feeling a little bitter about the Royal Rumble, because if you remember, Jey Uso eliminated John Cena in the Rumble to get his world title match with Gunther at WrestleMania. But yeah, let's get to the match. Jey Uso defending the World Heavyweight title against Logan Paul. And, not much really talk about. This was a 9-minute match, and Jey Uso defeated Logan Paul by pinfall. And then John Cena came out to attack Jey Uso. And so, Cena and Logan, they're attacking Jey. And then we got the return of the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. Yes, Cody Rhodes made his return to save Jey. And Cody got on the microphone after, getting rid of Cena and Logan. And he told Cena that he's ruined enough. And that at Money in the Bank, it will be Cody and Jey versus Cena and Logan in a tag team match. So Money in the Bank. Cody Rhodes will be making his return in the ring with Jey Uso to take on John Cena and Logan Paul. So yeah, I mean, this was pretty much just to set up the match for Money in the Bank. Nothing too fancy, too special, really to talk about. This was just a plot point for the return of Cody Rhodes. I'm glad to see Cody back. Cody took some time off after WrestleMania to spend some time with his family. Which, by the way, to all the fans who were bitching and complaining about Cody taking time off and saying like, "Oh, well, Stone Cold never took any time off," or John Cena never took any time off unless he was injured. Go fuck off, dude. These wrestlers, they have the right to take time away from the business to spend time with the families, with their wives and their kids that they never get to fucking see because they're too busy going to arena after arena to bust their ass and take bumps and in the ring night after night to entertain your ungrateful ass. Man, it boggles my mind how these fans bitch and complain that somebody takes some time off. Fuck off. Seriously. Like I mean, yeah, the wrestlers, they're contracted to WWE. They're under contract and they have to do whatever WWE wants them to do, and they have to show up for work and wrestle. But if they're on approved time off, which Triple H so graciously gives them because Triple H recognizes the importance of family and spending time with the family and being there for things. You want to bitch about that? Then you're just a shitty human being. Because time with your family, it's very important. And once you lose out on that time, there's no getting it back. There is no do-over. So for Cody to take time off after WrestleMania, after working a grueling schedule over the past year when he was the champion, he worked every PLE. He worked, just about every SmackDown. He even worked Raw, Saturday Night's Main Event. Cody did it all. Cody, worked that schedule to the best of his fucking ability. And I bet that he barely had any time home with his family, with his wife, and with his kid. So to be honest, Cody knew he was dropping the belt to Cena, and Cena was going to, be champion during his retirement run. So for Cody to take a couple months off, I don't think that's a terrible thing. But, you guys want to sit around and bitch and complain. And to be honest, he wasn't even gone, like, not even 2 months. Because how, like, WrestleMania was what, April 20th? And that was the last time we seen Cody. So, yeah, barely a whole month off. Yeah, barely a whole month off that he took. And yet, it's a fucking problem with some people. Give me a damn break. Let's talk about Raw from last night. We had more Money in the Bank qualifying matches. The first one was Penta, Dragon Lee, and Chad Gable. And dude, this was a crazy good match. And freaking Dragon Lee damn near killed himself, man. Like he dove onto Penta. Like he dove from the ring to the announce table onto Penta. And he damn near landed on his head and damn near killed himself. And then we had El Hijo del Vikingo. He was in the crowd during this match. Him and Chad Gable are going to have a match here coming up during the Worlds Collide event between NXT and AAA. As you guys know, WWE acquired AAA during WrestleMania weekend. So this is the first big event that they're going to do. for Worlds Collide. So yeah, Chad Gable will be facing El Hijo del Vikingo in a match, and it's going to be for the AAA Mega Championship. Now, and it's interesting because that title is technically still being held by Alberto Del Rio. And there's been a lot of talk about Del Rio possibly being back in the WWE. And I think AAA is going to be holding an event before this Worlds Collide show where it's going to be Del Rio versus Vikingo for this championship. So, in a sense, WWE might have spoiled the outcome of that match already because, they said it's going to be for the Mega Championship and that Vikingo is the champion. So, yeah, they might have already spoiled it. But, they now own AAA, so, I guess they can do what they want with it. But I think with respect to AAA, then, they should have held off until that match actually happened to start advertising Vikingo as the mega champion. But anyways, so Chad Gable attacked Vikingo. Like I said, Vikingo was just standing in the crowd watching the match. Gable attacks him. And then Vikingo got back at Gable later on the match. Gable was on the top rope. Vikingo kicked him in the face, and it actually busted Chad Gable open. So, yeah, and then Penta ended up getting the win here, and now he is qualified for the Money in the Bank ladder match. And yeah, I think this match was to build up, the Worlds Collide match with Gable and Vikingo. Now, I think what's going to be interesting, I think would be hilarious if Chad Gable tries to qualify for Money in the Bank again as El Grande Americano. So, yeah, I think that will be interesting if Gable tries to qualify for the match again as El Grande Americano. Because I think at SummerSlam, I think, that this is when this El Grande Americano gimmick is going to end for Gable, and he'll be revealed that it was Gable all along. And yeah, so I definitely think that the mask will come off at SummerSlam. Maybe it's against Penta. Maybe they'll do a mask versus mask match at SummerSlam between Penta and El Grande Americano. I think it's that they're heading in that direction. And at SummerSlam, it'll be Penta versus El Grande, mask versus match, or mask versus mask. So, but yeah, Penta will be in the Money in the Bank ladder match. He'll be sure to create some exciting moments for that match. And I definitely think the right guy won here. Roxanne Perez is causing dissent within the Judgment Day, and I called it, last week's show. If you remember, I said that Roxanne Perez was going to start flirting with Dominic Mysterio, and she did just that. So Roxanne, she came into the Judgment Day clubhouse. And I use that term loosely. It's more like a glorified hangout spot, and she brings him more chicken nuggets. And she offered to massage his shoulder. and she's like, "Oh, yeah, let me get that for you." But, her antics didn't last long because, Liv Morgan returned. Yeah, Liv Morgan is back from filming her movie role in Japan. And, yeah, she could see what was happening. And she said that she was going to handle this business. And you could see, Finn, man, he was just like a fucking pig in shit, man. His plan is coming together. His plan to break down the Judgment Day from within the group is taking shape, and he's using Roxanne Perez to do it. Because later on in the show, Liv Morgan had a match against Kairi Sane, and Roxanne tried to get involved in that match, and it just ended up distracting Liv to where she got rolled up by Kairi Sane and she lost. So yeah, I think Roxanne Perez is going to create some is creating dissent within the Judgment Day, because now not only is there tension between Liv and Dom, but now there's also tension between Liv and Raquel, because Liv blamed Raquel for her losing, because she looked at her like, "Oh, Raquel, you're the veteran. You should know better." So yeah, she blamed Raquel for her loss to Kairi Sane. So yeah, man. I mean, it's all coming together, and like I said before, I think Roxanne is going to drive that wedge between Dom and Liv, and it's just like Dom, Liv, and Rhea all over again. But now Liv is in the Rhea role, and Dom is yeah, he's knee deep in shit right now. So yeah, we're gonna have to see what happens there. And speaking of Dom and Finn, this leads me into my next topic, and that's Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins was in a Money in the Bank qualifying match himself against Sami Zayn and Finn Balor, and this pretty much went how we thought it would. Seth, he said earlier in the show that he was going to control the fate of the world titles in the WWE, and the only way to do that is with the Money in the Bank contract, which he is all familiar with, because you remember the heist of the century. Seth Rollins cashed in Money in the Bank in the main event of WrestleMania, back all the way back at WrestleMania 31. Against in that match with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, and he made a triple threat match, and he pinned Roman to not only win his first world title, but he also to win his first WrestleMania main event. So yeah, so Seth here got the win over Sammy and Finn. Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker showed up. They pulled Sammy out of the ring. Jey Uso tried to help Sammy, but they were they were overpowered by Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker. And then Dom showed up, and he tried to help Finn out. He's trying to help his boy out. He slid a chair into the ring for Finn to grab, but Finn couldn't get up to use it, and he ended up getting stomped by Rollins, and he got his head stomped into the mat. And Seth got the 1-2-3. Rollins celebrates, and then he eats a GTS from CM Punk. So yeah, this whole dynamic between Seth, Braun, and Bronson against Sammy and Punk is far from over, and I believe that a certain tribal chief might be making his return here very soon, because I believe at Money in the Bank, we're going to get a 6-man tag match. It'll be Sammy, Punk, and Roman against Bronson Reed, Braun Breaker, and Seth Rollins. Yeah, I think we're going to get that big 6-man match for Money in the Bank. But yeah, man, a lot of interesting things going on Monday Night Raw. I can definitely say that Raw has like more intriguing storylines to watch than SmackDown does. That's just my opinion. And because really, if you look at what I talked about from SmackDown compared to Raw, the only thing I talked about from SmackDown was the Wyatt Sicks, and that's only because I think that was the only thing that was really noteworthy to talk about. But yeah, I think Raw's got a lot of interesting things going on creatively, and yeah, man, SmackDown needs to really pick it up for sure. Yeah, you got Solo Sikoa and the Jacob Fatu stuff, but until Jacob turns, or until Solo turns on Jacob, there's really not a whole lot to talk about, because that's where it's headed. That Solo is going to eventually turn on Jacob, or Jacob's going to turn on Solo. That's what's eventually going to happen. But that's what happened on this week of current programming in the WWE. Now let's move on to the latest news. All right, our first news item here, and this is coming from Jonathan Coachman. This is the podcast that him and Vince Russo are doing, the Coach and Bro Show. Oh God. So yeah, Jonathan Coachman claims that Vince McMahon is trying to buy back WWE from TKO. Yes, Jonathan Coachman is. I mean, look, I'm not saying Jonathan Coachman's lying, dude. I'm not. He could very well be telling the truth, but he's been saying some outlandish shit. Ever since he started doing this podcast. And Coachman, he has a background in being, a journalist and stuff like that. I mean, after he left WWE, he was on ESPN and stuff like that. And I'm not denying that he doesn't have sources because he very well could be. There could be somebody that works for the WWE backstage that's feeding him all this information. But to be honest, I just have to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, would Vince McMahon try to buy back WWE? Yeah, I mean, it does seem plausible that he could be doing that or trying to do that, but it's never going to happen. He sold it to Endeavor, to Ari Emanuel, and there's just no way that Ari's going to sell the company back to Vince McMahon. There's just no way. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. WWE is as profitable as it's ever been, and there's just no way in hell that they're going to give it up now. Now, I could see if WWE was hurting and they weren't selling tickets and the product was shit, then maybe it could happen. But there's no way in hell that they're going to get rid of it now. It's making them way too much money. And there's just no way in hell that they would sell it back to Vince McMahon. There's just no way in hell that's going to happen. So if Vince is trying to buy the company back from Ari Emanuel, then Vince might as well just move on. He is never going to have full control over the WWE ever again. It's never going to happen. So, but yeah, I mean, and yeah, so Coachman, he also said that Cena and The Rock will have an interaction at some point this summer. So Coachman, yeah, some of this stuff, if it, in order for Coachman to come off as credible, some of this stuff needs to start checking out. So if Cena and The Rock don't have some kind of on-screen interaction by, I would say, September, then Coachman's full of shit, and that he's just putting stuff out there, so that way people, tunes into his podcast with Vince fucking Russo. But yeah, but another item here from Coachman is that Travis Scott, I talked about this on the last podcast about him and John Cena possibly being a tag team or wrestling a tag team match at some point this summer. And it looks like Travis Scott was originally planned to be John Cena's tag team partner at Money in the Bank instead of Logan Paul, and that Travis Scott is basically flaking out on the match. Now, this right here might seem more truthful and realistic because, there was reports out there that, they were planning on doing a Travis Scott and John Cena tag team. And I, made my fantasy booking pitch, if you will, last week where I said, at SummerSlam, they should do Travis Scott and John Cena versus Cody Rhodes and Bad Bunny. But, but like I said, it was just a pitch, just me spitballing. I wasn't really doing any real fantasy booking there because I'm not like clamoring for the match to happen. I'm really not. I don't think it's necessary in all honesty. But, I mean, but like I said, this seems a little more credible, a little more truthful than anything else that Coachman's been saying over the last couple weeks. Now, if Travis Scott is flaking out on WWE, then they probably just need to move on from him, because they put a lot of investment into this guy. They made his theme song the official theme for Raw. They made Fiend the official song for WrestleMania. He was involved in John Cena's heel turn. He was involved in the main event of WrestleMania with Cody and Cena. But if he's flaking on them now, then they just need to move on. If he's not able to do it or he doesn't want to do it, then they just need to, you know, move on to bigger and better things. And then Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio is reporting that WWE is considering asking live TV fans to not swear during the show. Yeah, good luck with that. And this is coming from Meltzer. So, I mean, like I said, I don't really trust a damn word that Dave Meltzer really says because he's wrong more times than he's right. So, yeah, WWE is not going to be able to get the fans not to swear. They are going to say, holy shit, holy shit. They're not going to stop cussing, dude. And but if they're really going to ask the fans to tone down themselves and not to enjoy wrestling the way that they want to enjoy it, then fuck off. Like the fans are paying tickets. They're paying the price of tickets, which are going up through the roof more and more. I mean, hell, ticket prices for Raw are going up. Tickets for PLEs are going up. So I think if a fan is willing to pay the price of admission, then they have the right to say whatever the hell they want to say. They can chant what they want. They can cheer for whoever they want. They can boo whoever they want. Hell, it's been like that for over ever since wrestling became a thing. For over 100 years. People have been coming to the shows and they've been speaking their mind. And you want to take that from them because you're worried about some of those chants making their way onto, the international audience. Like, seriously? Then you might as well not even have fans. Let's just go back to the Thunderdome days, of COVID and not even have an audience. Yeah, we'll just have a bunch of TV screens of people, and people can tune in to whatever link it was for the Thunderdome, and we'll just do it that way, and we'll have piped in crowd noise, and we'll just do that since you want to be like that. I mean, like I said, I don't trust what Meltzer says, but if WWE really wants to tell people what not to do, then it's not going to go over very well for them at all. So they just need to shut the fuck up about that. If that is true. And then I will leave you with this. Kurt Angle and the Sandman have heat with each other from the looks of it. A clip resurfaced from the Legion of Skanks podcast. And the Sandman made a comment about Kurt Angle back in 1996 when Paul Heyman was trying to sign Kurt Angle to ECW. And this is when they did the crucifixion angle with Raven. And Kurt Angle was apparently very pissed off and turned off by this. He left. And he told Paul Heyman he was not going to sign with ECW. Sandman says that Kurt Angle was a pussy for leaving. And then Kurt Angle responded to this clip in a comment on TikTok saying, if Sandman has a problem with me, then do something about it, you pussy. For two people that I thought, of all the people to have heat with each other, it's Kurt Angle and the Sandman. Now look, ECW back in the day, they pushed the envelope, and sometimes they just ripped that bitch up. They did stuff that was very controversial, but they made a name for themselves. They thrived off that controversy. But I can understand Kurt Angle, his position on it, because I do believe that Kurt Angle is a Christian, and he probably felt that the crucifixion angle was disrespectful and everything like that. And, yeah, he's just like, oh, hell no, there's no way I'm going to work for this company if this is the kind of shit they do. And then, of course, a couple years later, Kurt ended up signing with the WWE, and the rest is history. But at the same time, I don't think Kurt Angle should be really taking the time to acknowledge the Sandman's comment. Honestly, I feel like he should have paid it no mind. The Sandman, he was probably saying it to, get people talking, because, when you're not really active anymore in the wrestling business, and if you're an older talent and, you're kind of irrelevant, then at times, you kind of need to make comments like this to get people talking and to get people to pay attention to you. So I'm kind of thinking this is one of those kind of situations. But yeah, I think that's all this is. It was just one of those attention grabbing situations, and I don't think people should be expecting this to be worked into some kind of match, because that is definitely not going to happen. Kurt Angle is very much retired, and the Sandman, I don't know if he's still wrestling or not. I think he is. Maybe he's doing like GCW or something like that. But yeah, don't expect this to turn into anything. All right, guys, that will do it for today's episode of Pro Wrestling Focus. I'd like to thank you for tuning in and listening. The YouTube page has been growing, and I appreciate you guys listening to the podcast, and the numbers and views are growing. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also follow the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get them. Go ahead and follow it. It helps the podcast grow. I'd like to thank you for supporting me, and as I move forward here, talking about more wrestling related stuff, and I'll be dropping some special podcasts here in the future. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be back later on this week for more wrestling content. And until then, stay tuned and stay focused.